I'll never forget the first time that I saw a wild horse. It was right at the edge of dawn, when the sky was in that special shade between blue and purple. And I thought in that moment, they looked like ghosts of the desert. We were searching for the answer to one question: why are wild horses disappearing?
In the western United States, there are less than 100,000 wild horses. They've always been an easy scapegoat for the livestock industry. They don't want to admit that the huge numbers of their cattle and sheep that are overgrazing are the problem with land health in the American West. And yet, the Bureau of Land Management wants to take away thousands of these horses.
Congress has really enabled this by appropriating $162 million in 2021 alone to fund these operations. It's abundantly clear the BLM knows it has something to hide because of the extraordinary lengths it goes to keep the public from seeing the conditions in these private off-range holding facilities, and it should terrify every single American who cares about wild horses.
Wild horses are under attack, perhaps more than ever before. And even worse, the Bureau of Land Management is currently trying to reduce wild horse populations down to what President Nixon considered to be extinction level.
If the United States follows its own laws, they would be protected by the Endangered Species Act. Not only would they be protected, it also protects the lands that they call home.
It's almost unfathomable to think that in our modern day, we're rounding up wild horses with helicopters. Aircraft and motorized vehicles were outlawed for brutal use in the 1950s. But in 1971, the Bureau of Land Management amended that act to introduce helicopters, claiming this method of capture was humane. Having witnessed these roundups firsthand, there is nothing humane about using a helicopter to chase a wild animal. Wild horses are forced to run for miles in extreme heat, breaking their legs or their necks, trying to escape or get back to their families. Babies, known as foals, can be crushed to death in the melees. The BLM knows these roundups are horrific to see, which is why it routinely hides the trap site from public or the press.
You can't see the holding facility and you can't go down there.
You're denying our constitutional rights. It is our right as journalists, as public observers, to go over there and point our camera
the safety
at
of
the trap
everybody
site.
And the coordination of this group. We want to keep you here, so that's what we're going to do.
A minute ago it was for safety. Now
It is
you're saying
safety.
it's because we're emotional.
Well, emotion runs into that. If people are getting emotional, how do you control people?
Further, unbeknownst to most taxpayers, the BLM awards millions of dollars to contractors, paying Couture Livestock Roundup Inc., for example, over $30 million to round up wild horses. They still hire Couture despite the disturbing fact that in 1994, Dave Couture was convicted of and pled guilty to a federal crime for conspiring to use his aircraft to hunt wild horses for the purposes of capturing them, killing them, and sending them to slaughter.
This is how narrow this stuff is. These horses are in this.
We decided to ask for support from not only the community fighting hard to protect them, but from children. And something miraculous happened. We began receiving thousands of letters from people all over the world who joined us in standing with wild horses.
The BLM is creating a problem with cattle and sheep, degrading the range. And then instead of addressing the cause of the problem, they're blaming the convenient scapegoat, the wild horse.
Yeah.
So they can keep on overgrazing with as many cattle and sheep as they always have without the American public noticing. Well, guess what? The public is starting to notice.
I think it's so important that not only the people standing here, but the children in our country stand up and raise their voices.
Dear President Biden, dear Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, and dear honorable members of Congress, I'm writing to ask you to make laws to help protect the wild Mustang herds. If you were a horse and you were rounded up in a tiny pen and slaughtered, how would that make you feel? Scared. That is how these horses feel, and that is sad and wrong.
The facts have shown that these horses just end up in kill pens, bound for a life of pain and suffering.
These majestic creatures are caught in the system of ranching monopolies, encouraged by government enablement. and distortion of the truth. President Biden, there are babies and elderly horses out on the range who will not survive the helicopters. These horses represent the story of America.
What will you do for the generations to come?
Have the courage to see beyond profit and take a serious look at America's long-term values. I'm Jocelyn, I'm 10 years old, and I stand with wild horses. I stand with wild horses. I stand with wild horses.
The system is clearly broken. Animal cruelty at the hands of a government agency should not be tolerated. It's our responsibility to change this. Public lands are for every American to enjoy, and wild horses, along with other wild species, should be protected, not destroyed. It's time to stand with wild horses.